super chats here before we get into the Arsenal and the Liverpool sections of this show. This here says Jackson and Wissa both off to AFCON, no sales to Newcastle. I mean, there is, I know there's an ongoing joke in the fan community. I'm sure on socials you've seen it around the rejections, but there is talk now that Jackson could go to Bayern and Wissa could end up in Saudi, and that would be another two. And I'm trying not to laugh, but there is something as fans hilarious about this. But for Newcastle, I mean, this does feel somewhat, what's the word I would use? Ominous, I suppose.
Yeah, I think first of all, Johan Wissa's priority is Premier League. It's as simple as that. So as I revealed last week, both Neom and Al Nassr have held talks. We can't say he won't go to Saudi, but his priority is to wait for Champions League and therefore a Premier League move ideally. And I still think that Newcastle will end up coming back in for Johan Wissa. It'd obviously be fascinating if it's Nassr against Newcastle for Johan Wissa, because then you've got PIF and PIF going after the same player. And it's one thing losing out on, say, Benjamin Sesko to Man United, but can you imagine how the Newcastle United fan base might react if they think Johan Wissa's a lock to Newcastle and then suddenly a PIF-controlled Al Nassr come in and end up hijacking that deal? So that would be an incredible drama. But I'm told as of this morning that Johan Wissa thinks there will be Premier League options with Champions League football. And obviously Newcastle are willing to bid again. And if they do that, I think the player would lean towards Newcastle over Al Nassr. With Nico Jackson, it's very clear that Chelsea want to sell. I think Jackson wants to play every week. There are options in Italy and the Premier League. Newcastle have held some talks. I think Chelsea's valuation is quite high. Let's see whether that price drops. And then maybe Newcastle might be in the race. There's an outside chance if Richarlison is sold that Spurs might enter the race for Nico Jackson. And Milan are still there too, but when they inquired last month, they also thought the asking price was too high as well. Maybe Bayern, I don't think we can discount it, but at the moment, it feels like a lot of outreach on the Chelsea side to line up options for Nico Jackson. And we're going to have to be patient to see which formal talks start. But the most advanced club at the moment, even though nobody is full-blown advanced, but the most concrete club as it stands are Newcastle, because they actually have held some direct club-to-club talks. And I think by all accounts, Nico Jackson would be quite open to a move to Newcastle and to go and play Champions League football there. So obviously Newcastle were not advancing or bidding or stating with any confidence that they would come in for Nico Jackson because they were only focused on Benjamin Sesko. Now they know they've lost that race. Let's see, because you've got Johan Strand-Larsen at Wolves. You have Ollie Watkins, but Villa's position is they prefer to keep, and the valuation is 60 million. You've got Nico Jackson. You've got Johan Wissa. So I think Newcastle are looking to bring in two attackers, one a bit more versatile and one an out-and-out number 9 in the Isak mould. And then should those names come in, there's a fair chance that Alexander Isak and Liverpool will move. And a lot of people saying to me, if Sesko goes to Manchester United, does that actually mean that Isak to Liverpool is off? Not my understanding. I think this is all just about replacements broadly and generically. I don't think it was ever contingent on one particular name. As long as Newcastle get in some reinforcements, then my expectation is still that they will offer some encouragement, Newcastle to Liverpool, to bid again for Alexander Isak. And if that encouragement comes, then it's most likely to snowball to a done deal, because Liverpool are not going to be back for Alexander Isak to bid blind. They're not going to be back for Alexander Isak to come to the table without any confidence. The first rejection of 110 million was so emphatic that Liverpool's perspective is very much, if you tell us there's a deal to be had at value, we'll be there in a heartbeat. And if you continue to shut the door, then we're not going to waste our time. So if there's any movement formally club to club between Liverpool and Newcastle, I'm told that means that Liverpool are confident. Liverpool feel it's going to get done. And if there's no movement, it's because Newcastle are slamming the door entirely shut, and Newcastle believe that stance to be genuine. So I'm not seeing a halfway house now where we go bid, another emphatic rejection, no movement. Of course, there might be games. Of course, there might be spin. Of course, publicly, you may keep hearing that the window could shut and Isak could be a Newcastle United player. But my clear understanding on this is that there's only two possibilities. Somehow out of nowhere, Isak extends and is allowed to leave next year, and he won't ever commit to that unless Liverpool tell him basically to his face, it's impossible now, or Isak goes to Liverpool. The third option was when the window opened of Isak's well contracted. We said it before on the show. Isak's well paid. Isak's got Champions League football. Isak's happy at Newcastle, and Newcastle have got all the cards. That was very much Newcastle's internal belief on the day they qualified for Champions League football. And I don't think the club were expecting the ferocity with which Isak is trying to force himself out the club, even with a good wage and even on good money and even with Champions League football. And I think this is down to the fact that a year ago, when Paul Mitchell didn't renew him, that's not been forgotten by the player. And I think he's been waiting and waiting and waiting, as it turns out, regardless of how Newcastle did last season, to get his big move this summer rather than next summer. And I don't think Newcastle were that aware of that at the time that Isak basically said, I don't want to be part of this football club. I don't want to be part of pre-season. So that's taken that halfway house option, because Newcastle basically had two of the three options. He stays as is, or he's renewed. Either way, those two options outweigh the need to engage with Liverpool. But now it's become extend or leave. I think Liverpool feel relatively optimistic that at some point in this window, Newcastle United are going to pick up the phone and say, actually, it might suit all parties to do a deal.
Yeah, it's interesting for me because when I saw the updates initially from yourself around Liverpool waiting for encouragement, my view was always bids for Šeško, talks for Jackson, progressing with Wissa. That is the encouragement. I made a bit of a joke of it on my channel, sort of saying to fans, don't misinterpret this as Liverpool waiting for a pep talk or a pat on the back or, a phone call saying, go on, my son, you can do it. I said, the encouragement is by their actions. It's not the same encouragement your dad gives you when he's watching you play Sunday League. It's the kind of encouragement based on your actions. And I think, as you're right, I know you're informed on this, but I think it's an obvious thing. Liverpool now just sitting there and waiting. And I spoke to a few Newcastle fans who were really worried that they're now not even going to get nowhere near their kind of desired amount because Newcastle put themselves into they think that they've put themselves into a vulnerable position with missing out on players, getting close to the deadline. And again, that's their fans, because their fans are, as much as I've laughed about it, because it's not a serious matter. They're not going to go out of business or anything crazy. Their fans are hurting right now, but they are concerned and worried about not getting the maximum money now for Isak.
Maybe, yeah. I mean, I would say two things. First of all, Newcastle are kind of getting hammered, particularly obviously by rival fans, because they have missed out on some targets. But what we should say is there's level of ambition at that football club. Great fan base, great community, Champions League football, top manager, lots of players like Bruno Guimaraes. Very happy there. Same at the moment anyway for Anthony Gordon. Tino Livramento more likely to get a new deal than leave for Man City. And they've elevated their targets. So they're competing with the big boys, but their wage bill and their infrastructure doesn't yet match the ambition. And if you can sell your women's team to your parent company, or even Man United, if you've got a wage bill that extends beyond 300,000 a week, you can fit these players in. Newcastle can't overextend financially until they've got back-to-back Champions Leagues. Only then do you start budgeting for it and enhancing your wage bill. So this is the challenge. And I don't think it's Newcastle fail, Newcastle miss out, everyone rejects Newcastle. I think they've just elevated their level of ambition so high that at the moment in their project, they're losing more races than they win. And some of that is down to the finances that they can offer. And even if you make an exception and give Šeško more money, or Isak is 300k a week, what's Bruno Guimaraes going to say? What's Tino Livramento going to say when he renews? And before you know it, if they do what they've done in previous seasons, European football, no European football this season. What if they get no European football next season? You're saddled with costs, and it would be reckless. And every club's the same, by the way, not just Liverpool and Chelsea and Arsenal in the past, in seasons when perhaps they've had a lull, they've reined the money in. But Villa and Brighton, when they got Europe, they didn't suddenly just spend. They realized that until you can show over a much longer period of time, it's like a default, the money you're going to get from Europe. You can't really change your model or your wage structure anyway. And then with the whole money for Alexander Isak, the price will be got by Newcastle if he goes. It's just a bit of gamesmanship where everyone knows it's going to be a British transfer record. Is it going to be 150 million? Maybe not. Is it going to be 110 million? No, because they've rejected that bid. Is it going to be somewhere in the middle, 120 million that Liverpool indicated they're prepared to pay, 130 million? Maybe. And that is outstanding money as well. And then the other thing in all of this is, remember, Liverpool's bid was 110 million fixed. And this is why the context is so important, because they went with 110 million fixed, not because they thought it would get done at 110 million, but they thought, if we're offering you fixed 110 million, then naturally it's a starting point. So
Yes.
Liverpool's expectation was to go in with optimism and assume Newcastle would go stick 10, 15 million of add-ons on that, go up by 5 million on your fixed fee, and suddenly you're at 130 and we can start discussing a deal. But instead it got shot down so emphatically. Liverpool said, if there's no slack, if there's no negotiation, if there's no engagement, we're not inclined to bid until you tell us, okay, now there's a deal to be discussed.
Yeah.
And then when we talk about encouragement and when we talk about Liverpool not doing anything at the moment, I think we need to be very clear. Liverpool are doing things. Liverpool are having conversations. Liverpool are planning. Liverpool will be ready to bid if they're given encouragement. What does the encouragement look like? I think it's probably Yasser Al-Rumayyan or Jamie Rubin maybe calling up Michael Edwards rather than Richard Hughes, who they have the relationship with, and saying informally and discreetly, let's line something up here. And remember, Liverpool have just sold to a PIF club in Darwin Núñez, and the add-ons for that package are not known, not by me anyway, and the fixed fee is 53 million euros. So is there a discount on that deal? Because Liverpool wanted 70 million euros. How do we know that deal's not been done for 60 million euros? And that's because PIF and FSG have got a really great relationship. So I'm not saying they're linked, but if you've just done a really amicable exit for Darwin Núñez, a deal that suits PIF and suits Liverpool and suits Darwin Núñez, then it's some of the same people having conversations. And when they go to negotiate for Alexander Isak, there might be a middle ground. And that's the point here, that if Liverpool engage in any new formal conversations for Alexander Isak, it will be done because they know Newcastle are now prepared to sell. And as soon as you start with that desire from both clubs to reach an agreement that suits everybody, they'll find a middle ground. And I think Newcastle would be happy with the deal, or they're just not going to accept it. Obviously, I think Liverpool will be happy with the deal because they'll see it at value. And you know what? It reminds me of Florian Wirtz. I know we were dealing in euros rather than pounds, but Florian Wirtz was 150 million euros allegedly. That was the only price. Liverpool came in. He didn't go to Bayern. They acted discreetly. They ignored the noise. One day it was Bayern. One day it was Man City. Liverpool were waiting. Liverpool got the player buy-in, and then Liverpool got a deal for about 20 million euros cheaper than that so-called 150 million euros number. And Isak is exactly the same in many ways, but it's not 150 million euros. It's perhaps 150 million pounds. But are Liverpool going to be able to strike a deal for less if they get this deal done? Absolutely. Are Newcastle going to be happy with the deal if they agree to it? Absolutely. And is Isak going to get his dream move to Liverpool? Very possibly. But the first step is kind of as simple as it sounds. Newcastle United picking up the phone and saying, now is the time to engage with us. And if they do that, Liverpool will be there.